I get it. Lately I've seen a lot of writers complaining about NoSleep, and that's nothing new, but now I see them looking for other places where they could share their stories with the hope of being seen. And that's a big part of NoSleep's appeal for many writers. It has a large built-in audience, and if your story does well there, it could be a big boost in your career. Maybe. But even though NoSleep's reputation is well established, it's not the only online horror community. So I've put together a list of other subreddits where you can share your stories. For these subreddits, I included the number of weekly visitors as well as the amount of upvotes high-performing stories tend to receive. Numbers don't say everything, so I've included places where I've found good writing and some groups where YouTube narrators have found stories to read on their own channels. So let's get started. r/scary stories. At the start of this year, this community saw about 29,000 weekly visitors with 500 weekly contributions. Top stories were earning about 250 or 270 upvotes in January. If you go back a few months, you'll see 500s and 800s. And a top of all time being about 3,800 6 years ago. The rules are pretty straightforward. Only post your scary stories, no narration request or discussion, don't link outside the subreddit, and no AI stories. You've got to do the writing yourself. That's all pretty reasonable, and I think it keeps the subreddit from getting too cluttered. And when a narrator needs to get permission for a story, they can just DM the writer. And narrators do check this group for stories. I've seen quality narration channels like Dreadful Anecdotes link back to this subreddit. So if the exposure matters to you, then this group is worth a try. So just read a few stories and get a feel for what does well there. Short, scary stories. If you've got a quick idea to throw out there, this might be the place. Right now, Short Scary Stories gets 29,000 visitors and over 770 contributions per week. Over the course of a week, high-performing stories might rack up 500 to 700 upvotes. Like other horror subreddits, its top-of-all-time posts are all from 5 or 6 years ago. Those numbers aren't bad, but what sets this subreddit apart is its emphasis on very short stories. Your post must be less than 1,000 words. That's flash fiction territory. Stories must also be more than 2 sentences long, so no 2-sentence horror stories, but they have other subreddits for that. This group has more extensive rules than the other subreddits I'm looking at, so take some time to familiarize yourself with everything. Aside from word count, be mindful of style and sensitive topics, don't mimic other subreddits, and don't link anything in your posts. r/horror stories. This one gets about 37 weekly visitors with 420 contributions per week. Well-received posts here can gain about 30 to 40 upvotes in a week's time, with some standing out with over 200, but many will receive far fewer than that. As of this recording, no post has broken 1,000 upvotes. A pinned post from last year says that you can post fiction and nonfiction on this subreddit with no word count given. I've also seen people posting stories with images to grab attention, and I think I've seen some videos as well. There doesn't seem to be a ton of rules to follow, so you don't have to write your story as a first-person scary experience, and you don't have to stay in character in the comments. A lot of the stories I've read so far here are in first person, but you don't have to follow suit. Just write the story you want to write. Rules horror. This is a subreddit for stories that center around a set of rules. Right now, it gets 6,400 weekly visitors with about 150 plus contributions per week. Upvote scores run a wide range from a dozen to over 100. Rules and directions have become a very common trope in online horror, apparently popular enough to warrant their own subreddit. Think of all the directions of the left-right game, the instructions in My Sugar Daddy Ask Weird Favors, and all the containment procedures from the SCP Foundation. Give your character a list of rules to follow and suddenly you've set some expectations. You've established how important it is to maintain the status quo, and you've got the reader curious about what could happen if you broke the rules. Now the Rules Horror subreddit has a list of its own rules too, and they're pretty standard. Don't be rude, don't be nasty, keep it scary, that sort of thing. r/Tales from the Creeps. This is a newer subreddit. It started just last November and it has about 12,000 members. From that, it sees about 6,800 weekly visitors plus about 1,500 weekly contributions. So it's not a big community, but it's an engaged community. High-scoring stories here might get a couple hundred upvotes, with the top of all time still under 500 a month after its posting. That said, this community was formed for a very specific purpose. It's a spin-off from the fan subreddit for a horror podcast known as Creepcast. Hosted by YouTube personalities Wendigoon and Meat Canyon, the podcast features narration of online horror stories, as well as some commentary. It's released on YouTube as well as Spotify, iHeart, and Apple Podcasts. So this group formed after fan-made stories, which are encouraged, flooded the original fan subreddit. And to be clear, fan-made doesn't mean that the stories are about the show. Some are, but this is really just a place for horror stories and poetry. I've been really impressed with the quality of stories so far, and there's a slim but non-zero chance that the Creepcast team might select stories from this group to be read on the podcast. And if you plan on writing about certain kinds of serious subject matter, that's okay. Just be sure to add a content warning so that readers know what they're in for. If we're going by what's already been featured on the podcast, it can work. But the audience there has responded negatively to graphic or sensitive content in the past. The show's fan subreddit has seen a lot of heated discussion from viewers who did not differentiate between tactful and gratuitous. And look, if it's done in a way that seems tasteless, insensitive, or thrown in just for shock value, then criticism is warranted. But even if you think you've handled the topic carefully, you can't control how others will respond to it. In the Tales from the Creep subreddit, the comments I've seen have generally been very supportive and constructive. But things are subject to change if your story actually makes it onto the show. Again, the odds of any one story from this subreddit getting onto Creepcast are low, but if you get that big break, your story would then be heard by a much wider audience. And some, not all, but some of that audience can be much more critical. If you're a writer though, that's all part of the experience. You can't please everybody. And it would be surreal to hear your character's voiced by the guy who did Wabbit Season. Look, I'm not saying anyone should abandon NoSleep. There's no reason to stop reading or posting there, but you've got nothing to lose by branching out. If you love reading scary stories, you'll find them in all these groups I've mentioned, and they won't be bound by that well-trod NoSleep format. If you're a narrator, I hope you'll check out these groups and find something fresh. You're missing out if you're only pulling from NoSleep. Just remember to get the writer's permission like always. And if you're a writer, you don't have to put all your eggs in that NoSleep basket. None of these other groups have a huge slab of commandments that you have to follow or else you'll get banned. If you've got a story that isn't a first-person experience, where the scares happen directly to the narrator, but still allow the narrator to believably post their experience online, then you don't have to rework that story just to fit it onto NoSleep. Take a look around at these other groups, read their stories, and post wherever you want. Not every story should be a NoSleep story. And I know it might be discouraging to look at a community and see a lot of posts with just one upvote, but that's why you can't just be a writer. You have to be a reader too. As much as you can, be an active member. Read these stories, and if you like them, engage with them and let the author know. Be the kind of reader you would want for your stories. That's the only way these communities can grow. Okay, I hope this helps. A few months ago, I made a video on r/NoSleep and the kind of stories you would find there if you sorted by new. That was largely to recommend stories for readers, but today I wanted to talk to the writers too. I'll be on the lookout for new communities, so if I find anything else promising, I'll be sure to share it soon. In the future, I might do a video on other websites like Creepypasta and Nightscribe, but you can go ahead and check those places out. And also, if you've got a story that you really believe in, consider submitting it to a lit mag. Traditional publishing is a very different world than these online communities, but I think it's so good for a writer's growth to pursue publication. You won't always get a lot of feedback, and you will get a lot of rejection letters, but once you have something accepted, you'll feel like it's worth it. No matter which way you go, just don't be discouraged. I've started writing a lot more fiction these last couple of years, and I've really enjoyed the process. I'm getting something ready to share on these communities very soon, so maybe I'll see you on there. Until then, I'm gonna keep writing, and I hope you do too. Bye for now.